My question this time is about considering music as a piece of art. Mixing became boring and I'd just sort of stand there mixing and doing my thing and then thinking I need to build a new PC now. Okay, here we go. What cars do you own, or what cars do you like driving? Four wheels. I think we all know what a car is. I don't know why I'm describing a car. The answer is, importantly, no. Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It is my 100th vlog, it's been pointed out. It's not the 100th AMA though. What are we on? 68. Yeah, so welcome to the Kane audio vlog. Nothing's different. It is not Friday, it is Thursday, but I'm gonna do an Ask Me Anything right now because I've got visitors coming later and then I'm busy tomorrow, so I just thought I'd film it today, edit later, and then fine. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I look at last week's video, is there anything I need to mention in terms of house admin? I do sometimes write stuff down. No, I think we're good because I have been plugging the Mousetrap gig and Res, and that's all good. Spotify playlist. Did I update that last week or this week? That's one of the downsides as well of these AMAs being filmed on a Friday, is anything that happens right after each AMA is technically this week in my head. So that just makes it all the more confusing. Alright, I can't think of anything. I don't think there is any house admin. What have I been doing this week? I've been mostly finishing off a project for Universal. Still waiting on a few final details and got all the deliverables and everything across to them now. So I will probably talk more about that as and when I know more details. I don't think it's getting released anytime very soon, so plenty of time to talk about that later. What else is coming out release wise? There is still one major release coming out within the next month that I still can't talk about. I think that's kind of it at the minute. So yeah, let's have a look at last week's video and see what you're saying. I don't think there's too many questions this week. Last week was a belter. I didn't realise it went on for like an hour and a half. So you're welcome. Right, starting at the top, FanFan87, Jimmy, high five. Hi Dom, my question this time is about considering music as a piece of art or an entertaining product. For example, I consider your music as art because it provokes feelings in my mind. Adding that to the coherence with the personality you share through those AMAs. When I listen to your music, I see technical mastery combined to emotion. Thank you very much. Innocence to be precise. And I mostly see like your music asks questions due to the melodic structures, stoic intro structures, Sosumi mid breaks, even your AMA intro music where the soft arp is innocent and the Moog asks the questions. Interesting. And I say interesting because I think you're probably the first person to ever point that out. And you're absolutely 100% right on the money. That's exactly what I do with my melodies. They are questions and answers, and sometimes unanswered mysteries, and that's how I envisage it. So yeah, fair play to you for seeing that, because I don't think anyone's ever kind of pointed that out before. Yeah, you'll notice a lot of my melodies start with a question where something is raised at the end and then it gets given a response, an answer. and that's kind of how I treat my music. It's almost like it's conversations between synthesizers or melodies or notes or whatever, and that's how I like to write them, so that there's almost a narrative and a flow. Yeah, well spotted. So well done, you. Consider a random track. What are your conditions to consider the music you're listening to as true artistic piece or a piece that inspires nothing to you? Also, bonus question. Right, let's finish that one first. So, I think that's a tricky one because Webster's dictionary says no. Look, I mean, the question is, what is art? And I guess art is whatever you want it to be in your eyes. So for me personally, there is a distinct difference between what I'll separate as art versus money making noise. There are obviously artists and tracks out there that are objectively repetitive and objectively formulaic, and they are lowest common denominator sounds that are maybe just I'm trying to be careful with my words here because I don't want to be slagging things off, because at the end of the day, if a piece of music, no matter how generic, no matter how formulaic, if a piece of music gets 50,000 people dancing in a festival, who am I to judge that badly? You know, even if the music is objectively bad, let's say, well, it can still be subjectively good, and if that's good for 50,000 people in a festival, then, you know, it obviously does something right. So I'm always kind of careful with that. But yeah, I try to make my music with certain concepts in mind. I used to make music, and you know, feel free to compare my music to sort of what I was making 10 years ago, and you'll see there's a huge difference, because 10 years ago I was making music for my gigs and for people specifically in a nightclub in a specific scenario. And I wouldn't say I went to lowest common denominator sort of sounds, but I do feel that maybe I wasn't putting the right focus in the right place. I mean, it worked, it served a purpose, it was fine, but I did get very bored a lot of the time. I remember, I can still remember some gigs specifically, and I won't mention them because that's unfair, but there were some gigs that I did travelling to random countries and getting there, and just everything felt like it was all, I was on autopilot. Like, you know, even though I didn't know what tracks I was going to play in that set, I pretty much knew how it was going to go down and what kind of sound it was going to be and what kind of reaction each track got, and mixing became boring, and I'd just sort of stand there mixing and doing my thing, and it just all felt very formulaic. And I remember distinctly at that moment thinking, this isn't right, this isn't, you know, this is just basically a job making money, and there are probably easier ways of making more money than doing this. So yeah, so I try to sort of infuse some artistic intent into my music. I struggle to call myself an artist because I don't think I'm there yet, but I certainly try to. So yeah, thank you for noticing. As for drawing a line, I think I've kind of answered that. So for me, for a piece of music to inspire me, I think first of all it needs to be an interesting melody. It needs to be inquisitive. It needs to make me want more or think more. And there are lots of ways of doing that melodically. But holding tension is definitely one. Continuing motifs is definitely a good way of developing interest around a theme. If I think of some of the greatest tracks written in modern times that really hit me emotionally, there's the Inception track that Hans Zimmer did, Time. That is repetitive, but with very slight variations and changes. So that to me is the ultimate progressive track, because it progresses throughout, and it becomes more and more emotional as it goes through. Playing with those notes and the notation of repetitions, it carries so much weight for me personally, and it builds that tension. Then you've got something that because that kind of almost never resolves. It's like an unanswered question, if you want to think of it that way, and that's the beauty of that piece of music. But then if you want to look at more maybe answered questions, for me, the theme tune to David Attenborough's Blue Planet 2. Is it Blue Planet or Planet Earth? It's Blue Planet 2. Yeah, it was. Yeah, because I can hear some of the instruments have been assigned. I think the flute is dolphins, and so there are certain instruments in there. And if you listen to the technical mix of that track and how that has been done artistically, because each instrument and each layer within the mix kind of represents a certain animal or part of the ocean. It's hugely complex, but it resolves beautifully. Those questions are all answered, and then they come back, and everything has an answer. There's a call and a response, and it's immaculate. And again, it's hugely emotional. So for me, those are like the pinnacle of where music becomes a work of art for me, is where they can express those emotions so accurately that you don't need to ask your own questions. You everything's answered, everything's there. So I think that's kind of the pinnacle of art. But then, like I say, there is the opposite end of that spectrum, and in dance music, and I think I've been there myself, and I understand it, and it still serves a purpose. It's still got a function, so I don't want to slate it too much. But I would definitely rather be one end more than the other. Also, bonus questions. Will you share your Mousetrap mix? Do you have it recorded? And do you have a thought about making sets for YouTube, as Amelie Lenz does sometimes? So I didn't record it, and I have been thinking about this since. I did think about maybe recreating the set. And then I thought, actually, you know what? I quite like the fact that only the people who went to that gig heard my set and heard what I played. And actually, I played a whole bunch of tracks that I've never played before. And the set was very, very specific to that night in that location for that crowd. So I'm kind of sorry, but not sorry, in that I quite like it like that. So I don't know. I'm not a jobbing DJ, so I don't. I'm not desperate for gigs, and I'm not reliant on gigs to pay for the roof over my head. So I'm kind of lucky enough that I can be a bit of a dick when it comes to these things. So I like the fact that I don't need to be promoting every aspect of that. So I don't know is the answer. So I didn't record it, but I've been tempted to kind of recreate it, and then I think you can't recreate it. It was that thing in that moment that worked, and if you weren't there, you wouldn't know really how it worked. So no is the answer for now. But that's not to say I never will. I'm not against doing it. I just think for this one gig, some of the music I played there was kind of special to me, so I kind of just liked it being there at that one moment. In fact, I mentioned before a gig I had last month in Nostock Festival. I mentioned that because I was closing the festival, I was doing the closing set, not closing the festival. I was doing the closing set of that night. I decided to play the full original version of Prodigy Firestarter as the last track, because you can, I like doing things like that, but I like them being just for that moment. So yeah. However, I think if I was DJing a bit more regularly, then I think I would probably be a lot more inclined to maybe live stream some here and there. So it's I'm not against the idea. I just don't think it's something that's quite right for me right now, I think. So yeah, super happy about the 100th vlog. Me too. Cheers. St. Nicholas, did you enjoy your set last week? Yes, I did, very much. I've just mentioned that. Sorry I missed it. Thinking I need to buy/build a new PC now. Okay, here we go. Current one is Windows 7 iCore 3. I'm assuming that's i3, and 3 hard drives. Priced up for Z390 board, i9 CPU, 64 gig of RAM, 2x 1 terabyte NVMe SSDs, PSU case, and new display monitor. Don't need graphics card, as I'm only using it for Ableton and YouTube internet search. And the board comes with Intel integrated graphics. You might still need graphics of some sort. The integrated graphics, to my knowledge, is really poor. And even loading something like Ableton or Bitwig is still more graphics hungry than you'd expect. So I've never tried that, but if you can, test that, because take out your own graphics card in your PC at the moment and then load up Ableton and see how well it runs compared to, with or without. Because as far as I'm aware, integrated graphics is kind of good enough to load Windows, and that's about as far as you get. So definitely look into that. Would buying a cheap card help save CPU? Oh, okay, well, I kind of just answered that there. I don't know that it would help save CPU, but it would certainly help things to run smoothly. To my understanding, for example, loading a YouTube video, you have certain buffers in the video that will process in advance of it rendering onto your screen. With only integrated graphics, that buffer is going to be so minuscule that loading a YouTube video might become a bit of a nightmare, because it's constantly lagging and jittering, and it's not going to be able to play very smoothly. Especially in HD, because it's having to process millions of pixels at any given time, whereas a graphics card will do that easily without even thinking. So it's certainly something to consider. However, by the looks of what you've spec'd up, I mean, you're looking at Core i9 CPU, so you're not looking at cheap things. I mean, they're sort of £500. I would suggest maybe looking at something like the AMD RX 580 graphics card, because I think you can get those for about £150, and they're like, is it 6 or 8 gig of DDR5 or 6 even graphics? So yeah, either way, they're pretty fucking good. And for £100, £150, 200 at the most, you're getting a lot of bang for the buck. So I would say, in answer to your question, would buying a cheap card help save CPU? Might not help save CPU, but it would definitely make a big difference. And for that price I've just mentioned, compared to the price you're looking at, worth doing, yeah. Or if I got 8 cores, 16 thread processor, is it just wasted money if I don't want it for films or games or video editing? I would say you still want lots of cores and lots of processing. The beauty of, and I could be wrong on this because I'm not a specialist in computer tech, especially not in recent stuff, because I find that everything moves so fast, I'm kind of getting lost. But to my understanding, multi-threading or multi-core CPU has been around for long enough that most software developers are now taking advantage of the multi-CPU and multi-threading. So, for example, the Ableton devs have probably set up certain limitations. Again, I haven't seen Ableton 10, but I'm guessing whatever the latest version, and certainly future-proofing, looking ahead, it will be a thing, if it's not already. I'm pretty sure it is already, where Ableton will take advantage of having multiple CPUs. And I think that was the whole advantage of like Windows and Mac OS becoming 64-bit, if you remember, when that was a big deal. I think part of the reasoning behind all of that movement into 64-bit was it allowed you to sort of prioritize different data threads to different parts of different CPUs. So it should make a fairly substantial difference. I mean, the difference between a 6-core and 8-core PC, if you're just using Ableton, it's not going to be a massive difference. So I wouldn't worry, if you want to save money, don't bother going for 12-core crazy speeds, overclocking. It's probably going to be a waste then. But I would say at least quad-core. I would probably go for a 6-core these days. The other thing is, I did mention a few weeks ago that I'd recently built with my stepson a PC, and we'd gone with the Ryzen. If you're on Windows, I would highly recommend Ryzen, just based on price and bang for buck, because what did we go for in the end? We went for the Ryzen 5 2600, so it's 5th generation, and it's 6-core, and it seems great. It runs really solid. And apart from the user errors that we did while trying to get it set up, it actually all ran first time. Yeah, piece of piss to build. So I would definitely recommend that. In fact, if you guys want, I'll drop a PC part picker link below this video, or next week's video if you want, if I haven't done so already, with a list of the actual spec we built at. Because we kind of built that as so he's into gaming, obviously, so we wanted it to be good for current modern day games, but we wanted it to be on a budget, and we also wanted it to be somewhat future proof. It didn't need to be crazy future proof, but we wanted to be able to just upgrade each component if needs be. So yeah, that's where we're at. So cost so far 2,700, and that's not including. Why is it so much? Oh, okay, you've put a new display monitor in there as well. That's going to bump it up. Okay. That's not including a new sound interface, as my old one is Firewire. I feel that. And interface driver is not supported for Windows 10. Okay, that's why you mentioned Windows 7 earlier on. In fact, Focusrite have stopped supporting Pro 24 on their website. It happens, my friend. Yeah, I mean, I'm exactly the same boat with my Mac Pro. It's now like almost 11 years old, so pretty much nothing is supported anymore. So yeah, it gets to a point where unfortunately people like us have to, not update one thing like the main PC, but everything that goes with it and all the peripherals. And similarly with mine, if I update, or when I update my Mac Pro, I'm also going to have to change things like my UAD, because that's PCIe, and if I get a new Mac Pro or an iMac or any of the above, there is no PCIe slot. So there we go. So either I buy a Thunderbolt to PCIe converter, which last time I checked is basically the same price as buying a whole new Apollo 16 or whatever. So kind of pointless. Anyway, I've got 1,000 saved, hopefully 2,000 by Christmas. It's massive outlay, but I'm committed now, as I have spent so much on software and plugins that it would be a shame to not carry on using them, and they ain't cheap, even though I don't release tracks or use my tech to make money in any way. What are your thoughts? So I would say, if I remember, I will post a link to the Ryzen PC that we built. Like I say, so it's the Cooler Master, can't remember the name of the tower, but it's a mini or micro, I forget what they call it, micro ATX tower, the M80X tower. So it's a smaller than average tower, which meant we went for the M80X motherboard, which means you have slightly less peripherals. There's only like one PCI or two PCIe slots or something, so you can only really fit a good graphics card, and that's kind of about it. And again, with RAM slots, there was only 2 RAM slots. I'm sure you could get more if you need, but for what we needed, we didn't need more than that. So we went for an ASRock B450M HDV motherboard. Went for Corsair Vengeance 16 gig of RAM, so 2 8 gigs, and because we went with the Ryzen 2600 CPU, we had done our research and found that the Ryzen CPUs work really, they really take advantage of the higher frequency RAM. So we went with like 3000 something megahertz RAM. What else is in there? The CPU came with built-on Wraith cooler, so that was the cooling done, and the Cooler Master Tower has built-in fans, so we had more than enough to get started. We had an M.2 hard drive for bootable 512 gig, which is one that I had previously anyway. Can't remember the power supply, but it's about 600 watts and did everything we need. And what else? The AMD. So I went for the top third-party one, the Sapphire RX 580 graphics card, and it's a beast of a machine. It runs super quiet, super fast. All in, I think it was about £600, £700, something like that. So, I mean, you just, you know, for a 6-core 3 point whatever gigahertz with like 6 or 8 gig of graphics and super fast RAM, 16 gig of RAM, more than enough to run Ableton, Bitwig, whatever it is you want, more than enough. And if it wasn't enough, you can always just upgrade stuff as you go along at a later date. So all of that for about £600 or £700, you just couldn't go wrong. So that's my advice, is you've priced it up to 2,700, which is not bad for what you've priced up. But I kind of feel like, you know, even where you've gone with the Core i9, do you really need Core i9? And i7 should be more than enough to handle Ableton and stuff. Hell, look at the iMacs and whatever out at the moment. They're still running on i5s. So, and they're more than capable of, I mean, my processor is Nihilum processor. It's ancient, and it still runs everything. So there's a lot to look at. I would say, if I remember, I'll try and remember. I'll drop a link below this video, because I kind of feel like a lot of you are kind of PC nerds, which is awesome. So apologies to all the viewers and listeners of this that aren't PC nerds, but tough shit, that's what you get with an AMA. So I would say 2,700. I know you've included a monitor in that, so maybe if you can comment below this video what the price is without the monitor, because that makes a huge difference, because a monitor could be anything from £200 to £2,000. So yeah, I've no idea, but I would say it sounds to me like you may be overspending, especially if you're not a professional musician, you're not running a professional environment. You've said you don't want to be video editing. That clearly doesn't include a graphics card, because you're talking about integrated graphics. For me personally, I think 2,700 is too much for any PC that isn't absolute top of the range. I mean, if you spec an iMac, top of the range iMac right now, and juggle for bang for buck, you're looking at about 2,500. And I hate to say this, because I'm no longer a Mac fanboy, but the iMacs are pretty kick-ass, to be honest, and they are amazing machines. So long as you're not completely dumbfounded by some of the hurdles they give you, like no PCIe slots and stuff like that, then they are fantastic machines. So I am just going to hit reset on the camera because it's about to hit 30 minutes, and I'll be back in a sec. Last question. Were you aware of the Amazon rainforest fires? Yes, I was very aware. Burning for 18 days now. Very little media coverage on it. In my opinion, bigger than 9/11. Okay, I don't know that it's a competition between news articles, but yeah, it is making itself onto the news. And it's pretty horrific, but that's the world we live in. I don't want to get too much into politics, but we currently live in a world where the president of Brazil is who he is, the president of America is who he is, and the prime minister of Britain is who he is, especially with the last couple of days' developments in the UK. I know that a couple of years ago people were going, oh, it's just like Hitler, and oh, this is how the Nazis got into power. And a lot of people going, whoa, okay, calm down. And actually now I'm kind of thinking, you know what? Okay, this wasn't like full-blown Hitler in the 40s, but this is definitely very reminiscent to the Nazi Party and Hitler, and there's a lot of things going on, like Boris Johnson shutting down the government for proroguing. That is pretty much exactly what Hitler did at the beginning, and then calling a general election, and yeah, it's all very scary. Which unfortunately means a byproduct of these things, these climate change denialists being in power, and these conspiracy theorists being in power and supporting power. Unfortunately, the byproduct of that is things like the fire in the Amazon rainforest. Just a horrendous time to be human, if I'm honest. Certainly not the best of times to bring a newborn baby into the planet. It does make you wonder. So yeah, I do think we all need to be talking more about these things, and I also think we need to stop being so fucking tolerant of the far right. And I know that every time anyone mentions far right, someone will chime in going, ooh, what about the far left? Well, the far left don't have a governing body or leaders or any bullshit like that, and they're just psychopaths being psychopaths, which are on both sides. The far right is very different. It's very much an organised thing. So, yeah, it's not something I stand for. But, yeah, it's about time we stop tolerating intolerance, really. And I guess that's kind of where we'll end up, I hope. There are some people who are sort of suggesting that maybe this is a good thing, because maybe what these leaders are actually doing, knowingly or unknowingly, let's be honest, unknowingly, what they're doing is bringing in the holes and flaws of our systems to the public eye, so that we're all going, holy shit, oh, is that the system we currently have? Well, maybe that needs a bit of a change. So hopefully, I'm desperately hoping that all of this will eventually lead to positive changes for the better. If it doesn't, then we're all fucked. So there we go. Thank you in advance. You're welcome. Deadly Custard, Jimmy, high five. That was a serious multi-brew episode. I'm going through a lot of Savers tea bags here and loving it. Yeah, it was. Yeah, like I say, that was like an hour and a half last week. I don't think we're anywhere near that this week, so it's all good. Unknown Artist, hi Dom, loved this AMA. Full credit to you for being so open and honest about some bloody tough subjects. Just touching on the mental health topic, I'm actually training to become a psychologist, and couldn't agree more with what you said regarding this issue. You spoke the absolute truth. Thank you very much. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I'm glad I wasn't too far off. And also, congratulations on training to be a psychologist. Hell of a job. Just make sure that you take it easy yourself as well, because we all know that, a lot of people who work in mental health work there for a reason. So let's just leave it at that. So just throwing a random question to you this week, as I have no music related questions, and apologies if you've already mentioned this in a previous video. What cars do you own, or what cars do you like driving? I'm more of a bike guy personally, but can appreciate a decent car too. I'm guessing you mean motorized bike, not pedal bike. Yeah, well, on the bike topic, I do like a good bike, and I would like to own. I always wanted a decent sports bike, but I always kind of felt like I was a bit too reckless to own one, and I don't think that. And now I have a child, I definitely shouldn't own one. But yeah, so as far as cars go, so my current car is an old, that's like 11 or 12 years old, 12 years old now, a Fiat Bravo. It's nothing particularly special, but it is the love of my life. I always loved the Bravo Sport, and mine's the T-Jet Sport 150, so it's 150 brake stock. Is now pushing a little over 200 brake, so it's got full stainless exhaust system. Obviously, filters are upgraded, downpipe. I'm potentially upgrading the turbo to a hybrid at some point. Lots of little mods here and there. The biggest issue initially with that car was the body roll, and to anyone that doesn't know what body roll is, when you're in a car which is a solid, let's call it a solid cube, like a shoebox shape with four wheels. I think we all know what a car is. I don't know why I'm describing a car. If you imagine a shoebox though, going round a corner, all four wheels are on the floor. Now if you were to take the lid off that shoebox, because most cars have a very pliable roof, and the A pillars, which are the pillars down the front, the B pillars down by the windows, they're really the only thing holding the roof in position, and they're not exactly scaffolding bars. So what you get is, if you imagine holding that shoebox and take the lid off, now all of a sudden it twists. You can twist that shoebox. So that's what you call body roll in a car, which means when you're taking corners fast, it's going to twist slightly, and one or two or possibly even three of your wheels are going to start losing grip with the road, and that's going to cause either the back end to slip out, or for the whole car to slip sideways, or whatever, any number of things depending on the angle, speed, whatever. So I've also uprated and put in strut braces in the front and rear and lower of the car, so that's pretty damn rigid. Obviously it's stiffened sports suspension and everything, so it's back braking when you go over speed bumps. Yeah, so there's loads of little mods I've done over the years of owning it, and yeah, I just love that car. I've often been tempted to maybe change to the Alfa Romeo Giulietta, definitely the Quadrifoglio version, because where mine is currently just tipping over 200 brake, the Quadrifoglio Giulietta is like 240 stock, so you can take that to nearly 300, so we're getting into pretty good territory there. But then again, it's not always about horsepower, is it? Because I went for a drive through Snowdonia Mountains earlier this summer? Yeah, it was in the spring. And I went with a couple of mates who were driving big 3-litre BMWs, and one of them had a modified 700 brake Audi RS6, sorry. And that thing went like the clappers on the motorway. If all of us just floored it at the same time, that RS6 was gone and left us all for dust. However, when it came to the twisty turnies, because I love my track driving and I love the twisty roads, and I've modified my car for the twisty roads, it's not for straight line speed, then I know the RS6 really struggled to keep up with me, because it's all-wheel drive, so it has slight oversteer, understeer, and it doesn't matter how many brake horsepower you've got. If you've got understeer going around corners, you just have to slow down. There's nothing you can do. So there we go. As for dream car, again, Alfa Romeo. I'm an Italian car fan. I love my Italian cars. So I'd have to go with Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Just what a beautiful car. Beautiful to look at. Just an amazing car in every way, shape or form. I mean, I guess if I won crazy lottery, millions and millions, I'd probably buy... probably a Ferrari F12 TDF. Maybe is it the GT4 Lusso as a family car? Because why not have a V12 engine as a family car? But yeah, other than those, and I would have to be crazy lottery winner to get those. Other than those, my dream car is the Giulia, which I think is like 60 grand brand new or something. It's not that expensive. Way too expensive for me, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that crazy. As for cars I like driving, so I've driven a lot of cars, but I don't think anything beats the Italian cars, to be honest. And it's kind of a weird, as Jeremy Clarkson used to say, you're not a real car driver until you've owned an Alfa Romeo. And I kind of agree, because there's something about the Fiat Alfa Group cars. My Fiat, for example, it's not going to beat anything like a Golf R or an Audi RS3 or any of those sort of equivalent hatchbacks. The interior is nowhere near as nice. The handling is nowhere near as good. The gear shifts are nowhere near as decent. Everything's just a little bit rickety and notchy. But for some reason, there's just so much passion in there, and nothing beats driving it. And, if I get out of my car and I get into something like BMW M135i or something like that, it's just boring. It's soulless. It's lifeless. I like a lot of the Audi cars. I love the Audi interiors. I love the 5-cylinder engine. Obviously, for me as a sound designer, engine sound is a big deal. So give me a 5-cylinder engine or a V12 any day. But again, with the Audis, they're just kind of soulless, and they're just point and shoot cars. Whereas the Italian cars are more like trying to ride a wild bull and trying to tame a wild horse. They're a little bit out of control. They're a bit of a nightmare. Random things go wrong at times, but it pays you back in other ways. I guess that's what I'm saying. So there we go. That's my rant on cars for now. All the best. See you in the next one. Cheers. Raphael, Jimmy, high five. Congrats for reaching vlog 100 by the time you're reading this. Thank you very much. Congrats, and thanks, of course, for the commitment and discipline on that. It's one of the reasons I love these AMAs, is it's just kind of something I can do every week. And even today, for example, it's actually a Thursday and they go out on a Friday. I enjoy doing them. I could easily have said this morning, forget it, I'll do it next week. But I enjoy them, so keep these questions coming, because they are good. Question: what was the main or more things you believe that helped you finally reach the pro level? Was there some kind of click, like starting using exciters on masters, parallel compression, or even getting some help from a mix or mastering engineer? You know what? I think that's a really important question, because the answer is, importantly, no. There wasn't one click moment. And I think that's really important to say, because I always expected to have a click, and I'm sometimes a bit disappointed that I didn't have it. And there are moments in my career where I've kind of taken a step back and gone, shit, is this real? Is this, this can't be real. Is this me? But there are no real click moments. And I think it's really important to say that I always expected I don't know, maybe my first big record release, or maybe my first big international gig, or whatever, that to have a first big milestone moment. And I remember even as a kid, I remember picturing myself in a studio, recording a new track and finishing the track and sitting back and having a cigar or something. And, you know, that sort of special moment. And when I turned 18-ish, I think, I remember buying a pack of cigars thinking, this is for when I get my first big click moment, whatever that is, you know, first big record release, whatever. And in my late 20s, I still hadn't smoked a single one of those cigars because I'd never felt there was that moment. So the reason this is important, though, is because my entire career, and I can't speak for everyone else's, I know other people have different career paths, but my career, I've worked very hard and incrementally increased or progressed as time goes by. There have been some moments where, looking back, I've gone, wow, that was a big deal. You know, like my first track being signed to Mousetrap, or like I said earlier, my first big international gig, my first tour. But it's really difficult to explain that actually those things at the time maybe weren't as big as they should have felt, and I don't know how they should have felt, but it's a difficult one to explain. But I feel like, so when I first, you know, I started producing music when I was, I don't know, 14, something like that, badly, but 14, I think. And then by the time I got my first proper signed track, I was probably 20. So I'd been producing for a long time already. I'd already put in years and years of hard work, and I'd already built up all the contacts, and I felt like I was already in the music industry anyway, because all of my friends were producers and we were sharing things. And so when that first track got signed, I don't even know what my first release was. That's how unimportant it was at the time. When I set up my first record label back in the day of vinyl, again, looking back, that should have been a big deal. But at the time, I was working so hard on getting things together that I don't think I stopped to really think this is a big deal. So again, with production techniques, I had been producing for so long, and still have been producing for so long, that when I learn something new, I go, oh, okay, that's good. And then maybe my next track is a little bit better. And then I might learn something else new and go, oh, that's cool. And then my next track is just a little bit better. So there's never been one single moment. There's never been one sound design trick, or one, like you say, parallel compression trick, or nothing like that that made me go, wow, this changes everything. Because it didn't. It was just hard graft, keep repeating, keep progressing, keep moving forward, keep learning new little things here and there. And I think, to me, that's the most important thing that anyone can do as a music producer, is just keep learning those little tricks along the way, because they all come together eventually. You don't have to use every trick in every track all the time, but there will be moments where you go, you know what, that thing I learned last year about this, that and the other comes into play here, and it works. And I think that's what makes you a better producer. But I feel like if there was a single trick that everybody went, aha, this is the answer to all of my life's problems, then I kind of feel like everybody would be able to do that. And clearly not everybody can get a career in the music industry, and not everybody can get, I don't know, a number one hit single or whatever. So I guess what I'm trying to say to everyone is, don't get your hopes up too much for that big moment, because that doesn't always happen. But you might find years later, you look back and go, holy shit, how did I get here? And I think that's how my career has been, is that, you know, I remember Because, for example, looking at DJing, my first gigs were local. Most of them I put on myself. I remember walking into pubs and bars and clubs on a Wednesday or Thursday after work in my day job. I'd go to pubs and bars and clubs and go, "Do you need a DJ? I'm a DJ. I've got my own sound system. I've got my own decks. I've got everything. Can I put on a night here on Sunday afternoon?" You know. And I remember there was one pub in Bristol, the Dog and Duck, and they used to drag out a big sound system. They had reggae on every Sunday afternoon. And I said, "Look, I've seen you drag out these sound systems. Let me put on a gig down in the basement. I'll just, give me the basement for a Sunday afternoon, evening, whatever. I'll bring my own sound system. I'll bring my own decks. It's fine." And they said, "Yeah, okay." So that's what I did. And then I printed out flyers and, things like that were kind of some of my first ever gigs. So it was just me being a ballsy bastard and just asking anyone, because I was desperate to just do gigs and play people my music. I didn't give a shit, So that's kind of how my DJing career started. And then I got to know other promoters and other producers and other DJs, and we put on parties. And so then, when it came to my first ever international gig, I think it was in Mallorca. Yeah, it was in Mallorca in a club called Tito's. And I remember this guy getting in touch saying, "We'll pay you," I can't remember, it was probably €50 and a flight to come to Mallorca on Saturday night and play for us. And I thought, wow, yeah, okay, great. But he was a friend of a friend or something, and he was again part of the big circle. So I didn't feel like it was this big special moment. It was somebody who I kind of knew the name of, and he spoke to someone who knew me, and it wasn't a huge moment in my life, although looking back it kind of was. But again, I had worked so hard for that, and I had pushed so hard for that, that it wasn't a surprise. It wasn't I didn't feel like it was a milestone at the time. It was just the next step to the rest of my career, I suppose. And again, by the time I got to that point, looking back at that moment, I'd put in so many nights and so many local gigs and blah, 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 blah. It was kind of part of the stepping stones. So that's kind of, I feel like I've ranted unnecessarily now, but the point I'm trying to make is try not to focus on huge milestones, because they'll probably fly by. And as I say, so after I'd done all international gigs, and then I ended up getting a residency in London in Ministry of Sound. Again, should be a huge deal, but I'd already done most of the London clubs, so Ministry of Sound by that time wasn't just one more club, but actually it kind of was just one more club. So I think it's important to be aware of that. And yeah, and then, I got the residency in Ibiza and did Space. Again, Space, one of the greatest clubs to have ever existed. And I got a fucking residency there on a summer, for We Love, which was the best night in the best club in the world, in the best island in the world. And I remember at the time thinking, this is cool, my first gig there, and I flew over and I bumped into Mr. C from The Shaman, and I remember sitting with him on the aeroplane, and we were talking about vinyl and blah, 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 and then he was like, "Hey, come for some food," once we'd landed and checked into the hotel. It was fine. So I went for a meal, and I was sat there, and we ordered some red wine, and he was talking about the difference between Italian red wine and Spanish red wine. And I remember sitting there all of a sudden thinking, holy fuck, how did my life get to this? I remember when I was, 11, 12, 13 years old, and I was writing down the lyrics to a Shaman song, learning the rap that Mr. C did in Ebenezer Good. And I remember, he was my idol. That song was everything to me. That was the birth of rave for me. And all of a sudden, skip forward 20 odd years, and I'm sat in Ibiza with Mr. C, eating steak, drinking red wine, about to go and play the best club in the world. And I sort of sat there thinking, holy shit, where Where did this come from? How did this become my life? And yeah, so again, that was kind of a big milestone, but only in hindsight. So it wasn't career changing. It was just oh shit, I'm here now, you know. So yeah, I feel like that was a bit of a rant and a bit of a story, but whatever, one worth telling. I like it. Question. So, okay, you've asked about reaching pro level. There really wasn't anything. It was just little step, little step, little step. Oh, how did I get here? So that's the answer. Thanks for doing your part in the electronic music community. One day I will do the same for sure. I hope everyone does. Again, best wishes and have a nice day, man. You too. And last one, which is good because we're just coming up to 25 minutes on this one. Rod Marconi, Jimmy, high five. Hi Dom, I love a good vocal on a dance track and was wondering, have you any tips on acquiring, recording and mixing vocals? P.S. Congratulations on the 100th AMA. Much appreciation. Thank you. I love a good vocal on a dance track. I was wondering, any tips on acquiring, recording and mixing vocals? So it's really difficult. Finding a good vocalist is really difficult. I happen to have a couple of friends of mine who are great vocalists and songwriters, not in electronic music necessarily. So they're always kind of able to hook me up. Aside from that, do you know what? I heard a loops pack recently. I grabbed a vocal loops pack and there was one guy who sang a few parts in a vocal loops pack and I had to get in touch with Loop Masters going, who the hell is this guy? Put me in touch with him, which they did, and I'm working on something in the future. So watch this space. So that's, you know, I guess I'm in a bit of a privileged position to be able to do that. There is a website, Luke Chable runs it, I think, and I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, Luke. No, can't remember the name. But he runs a site which is supposed to be for hooking up producers and vocalists alike. Also, there is sites like, I think it's UK Music or something. I wouldn't bother with that. Yeah, I'm not getting into that story. That's a whole different story. But yeah, I wouldn't use their website. As for recording and mixing, again, I have a friend of mine who is a phenomenal vocal mix engineer and recordist. Okay, that cut out there because my card was full. I forgot to format the card. Right, come on. Last one, Dom. So what was I talking about? Yeah, so any vocals I record, not necessarily for Dom Kane tracks, usually on other projects, because I don't do many vocal tracks. Yeah, I tend to use my mate to do the mixing and everything on the vocals, because genuinely I feel like mixing a good vocal, especially when you're dealing with, 5, 10, 15 harmonies, mixing a good vocal is like mixing an entire track. So as a mix engineer for electronic music, I'm fine. I know where everything sits. It all comes naturally to me. I don't have a problem with that. Mixing a vocal is a whole other skill that I don't trust myself in yet, and maybe never will. Who knows? I've not really put enough energy into it because I don't do it often enough. So I recommend don't bother learning to mix vocals if you're dealing with big vocals. Get someone else to do it. Pay for someone to do it because it's worth the money. Because there is nothing worse than a badly recorded vocal or a badly mixed vocal. It can be the make or break of a track. So there's that. Yeah, other than that, I really don't know how to acquire vocalists. It's something I've often struggled with. You can go through publishers. Again, maybe I'm in a privileged position there because I work with lots of different publishers, so I'm able to access their rosters. But again, that's not quite as easy as it sounds. You'd think you'd be able to just go, hey, put me in touch with so-and-so. But, often if you're looking for a good quality vocalist, then often you kind of have to jump through hoops to do that. And for me, that's not what making music is about. So kind of tricky. Yeah, so I don't know is the answer. That doesn't help. But that, my friends, is the end of this week's AMA. Thank you very much for listening. let's find a keyword if you've made it this far in. I feel like I've kind of ranted a lot this week. Let's have a look. Well, there's lots of you know what? Let's just use UFC, because I'm seeing there's Conor McGregor interviews. I'll never retire. Oh, that's weird because he did. And then Khabib is coming up, of course, next week. This week, next week. So yeah, anyone who's into MMA or UFC at least will know that it's a big fight next week with Khabib, because Khabib beat Conor McGregor last time. Anyway, so yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, then comment the word or 3 letters UFC, and I'll give you a high five in next week's video. Yeah, thank you very much for listening, watching, whatever it is you do, and I will see you same time next week. Cheers, have a good weekend.